Hi, this is Ed from Wright. Today we're going to talk a little bit about where we are in the market, and there's a lot of competing products out there coming into the marketplace, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But first I want to thank you for having bought a Wright mower. When you buy a Wright mower, it's a culmination of value for both of us. You're able to create a more profitable living for yourself, but also you create a living for us. We can make better mowers and contribute to what we have going on here in Frederick, Maryland at Wright Commercial Products. So over the years, a lot of different things have happened. We came out with the stand-on concept in the early 90s. Great Dane went to market with it. Dane Skag created the Great Dane brand and very quickly went to market. And there was a lawsuit there and whatnot, and eventually we went into making mowers. It was rather a forced thing because at that time we were an accessory manufacturer, a landscaper, and we had to get into the market. We started making mowers one at a time, and we saw a day. We saw a day where our patents would expire. That's the valuable thing in patent law, right? That a patent can be created and a business can take advantage of that R&D to establish a market for themselves. And that's what's happened. But it's also a good thing that patents expire, because otherwise there would be a monopoly, right? Look at things like the drug industry, right? It's important that at some point in time those things become available across the entire industry. And so that's where we believe we are right now with stand-on mowers. We believe that we're in the beginning of the bell curve where the market is growing. In fact, we really believe that by the year 2020, that stand-on mowers will be the #1 kind of mower used for cutting grass. And we believe that many of our competitors will be part of that movement as well. And as our competitors come out with products, it will challenge our products. It will force us to become better, force us to have better products. We also believe that in the years that we've been making mowers and the patents allowed us to have the specific unique thing of standing between the wheels on a stand-on mower, it's allowed us to establish a business that's large enough to provide good quality, efficiency, good prices, those kinds of things, but also small enough to listen, to understand our market. And so we're excited to be at this point in time. We're very grateful for all the different things throughout the life of our company that brought us to this point. And we'll talk about these competitive mowers here in a second, but I really don't want us to get focused on our competitors' mowers, because if you focus on the competition, you'll never be better than the competition. Our sole focus needs to be on you, your landscaping company, what you need in mowers. What do you need in the next generation product line, whatever. We have to understand what you need and not just what our competitors are doing. That's how we stay ahead of the competition. When Bill came out with and Jim came out with the concept of standing on a stand-on mower, they weren't asking themselves, how do we compete in the market of stand-on mowers? What they were asking themselves is, how can we be a better landscaper? When they came out with the Velke, how can we more productively ride behind, hydro walk behind? So those kinds of things. So we'll talk about the competing product a little bit, but in the light of to not be so focused on it, to be focused mostly on the utility that the product brings to you. So here we have a Ferris, we have a Hustler. We have these two machines here just because they're the two that have really come most recently into the marketplace. Starting off with the Ferris, it's designed a little bit differently than a lot of our mowers. A lot of our mowers have pump and motor hydro systems. This machine here has an integrated transmission, and from my standpoint, I believe the debate of pump and motor versus transmission is a little bit of a pointless debate. What's most important is your hydro system sized for the machine that it's in. And so a transmission that's being just dogged won't last very long. A pump and motor system that's being dogged won't last very long. There's, okay, what is the cost and whatever. And there's a small cost difference between the two, but in a commercial product, it's not as big as in the residential product. So certainly there's a price advantage albeit maybe not as big as some folks make it out to be. Now, by using an integrated transmission, you inherit some of the other challenges, right? So you have to go to a larger wheel diameter that makes the machine even longer, because the transmissions would be too close to the ground, too close to curbs, and also to keep you sort of in between the wheels. That wheel diameter is necessary. Also, to get the transmissions up high enough where the belt drive will work properly to the cutter deck. Now, also by using transmissions, you have to position the engine. The engine has to be positioned right really tight between the operator and the front of the machine, too far forward, too heavy in the front, etc. Well, when you put the engine where you have to put it, it's so close to the cutter deck that it makes your cutter deck belt drive a real design challenge. A challenge to get that belt down to the deck where when you lower your deck or you raise your deck, that belt is not just fraying itself badly. So there's some unique challenges to doing that. And there's a trade-off, right? On a Wright mower, you have more moving components. Your hoses move, your wires flex, to meet where the engine is. But that belt drive, boy, it's spot on, right? All the time. So there's pros and cons, and certainly we've chosen our path for specific reasons. And also, when you position the engine, you have to position as far away from the cutter deck as you can to have that long enough run down to your deck. And when you position that engine back here, it ends up really, really close to your pulleys on the transmission. So you have a very, very tight belt drive, very difficult to install belt in a transmission style system. Now, the Ferris would be very similar in architecture to a Bobcat, a Bad Boy, a Dixie Chopper. They're all pretty similarly built, similarly sized machines. So just from an overview, that's a lot of what the Ferris has going on. They've put the fuel tank on the inside here to centralize that. Overall, I would say that in a Wright mower, you're going to get a more beefy, solid mower. And just some examples of that, this deck here, it's a much thinner gauge deck than a Wright deck. The reinforcement, there isn't a lot of reinforcement in here. The baffles have been welded in, and so there's no ability to reconfigure your deck or fix that if it gets bent or anything like that. So you definitely notice that on a Wright mower, you're dealing with some very heavy-duty commercial components there. Now, let's move over here to the Hustler for a minute and just describe briefly what's going on here. We're not going to get real close up on it, but just in general, let me describe what's going on here. This machine has a pump and motor setup. So it has two pumps behind the engine and wheel motors down there. The engine is fixed to the frame, it doesn't float with the cutter deck. But in order to get the machine compact and stand where they wanted to stand and whatnot, they actually had to mount the left pump on top of an extra spindle behind the engine. So the engine has a serpentine belt that drives that spindle, runs to the other pump, goes through two idlers and back. And so the entire machine is being driven off of one belt. Now on that back spindle, the pump is mounted on the top side of it and the clutch is mounted off the bottom side of it. So now you have a few more things that provide an opportunity for shortage and reliability. And you've also put a lot of heat in the back of the machine. So the advantage to what they did here is because they fixed the engine, doesn't float with the cutter deck, and they put their clutch in this back corner, they can get a little bit longer throw down to the deck, so the belt doesn't angle quite as much as, say, a Ferris or a Skag v-rind, something like that. So they've got that clutch further from the front of the deck, but they've added some complexity back there to get it done. So from a overall architecture standpoint, that's what's going on here. As a machine in its entirety, there's definitely some challenges here. There's, for example, I believe the 36 weighs about 990 pounds. And as we learned, when we used to make the small standers like this here, when we originally came out, they had like a 6.5 inch wide tire, I believe it was, on a 36. And it was just so much ground pressure for that width. And at one point we had to redesign that and go up to an 8.5 inch wide rear tire on this machine. This machine's pretty light. In fact, I can tell you here that it weighs 650 pounds. versus a 36 Hustler at 990 pounds, right? So weight, tire size can quickly become an issue with that much weight. Now, overall, I would say that it's an intensity class machine. So here we have an standard intensity, very comparable in terms of running gear. However, even as a 52, this machine is still heavier than a 52-inch ZK, which is in a much higher class or category. So certainly, weight would be a big challenge for this machine. I'm sure they'll have some success with this mower, but that's an overview of what's going on there. And even though it's so heavy, you notice also that this machine also has a fairly thin cutter deck. So especially down south where there's a lot of sand abrasion and that kind of thing, even if structurally it's there, that thickness becomes important, because that thickness is just a matter of how long will that deck survive a lot of the sand exposure and that kind of thing that you can have on a cutter deck. Now, from a Wright standpoint, we have a full line of mowers. So we have the fixed deck standard. This thing is bulletproof, military grade, right? There's very few moving parts in this machine, rock solid, thousands of hours. There's guys out there with 6,000 hours on machines like this. Very, very tough, very rugged, heavy reinforcement. But the disadvantage is here you don't have a floating deck. We have a similar machine down here on the end. We have the fixed deck 36. So this is offered in 32 and 36-inch widths. Again, it's a pretty lightweight mower. Very, very solid, very rigid, but it has a fixed deck again. So it's a matter of what you're looking for. Moving up from there, we have the standard intensity. So the standard intensity is 11-inch front tires, 18-inch rear tires, mid-size engines, 36, 48, 52 decks, somewhat comparable to what we have here in the Hustler. Moving up from this, we have the Standard X. So the Standard X is 48, 52, 61, and it has a little bit bigger engines on it. It has 20-inch rear tires, and actually bigger rear tires are not always better. 20-inch is a pretty good size where you get a lot of flotation, but the machine isn't bigger than it needs to be. So it has 20-inch rear tires, 13-inch front tires, and in many ways it would be comparable to the Ferris here. The only difference is the Ferris has a little bit bigger engines for a pretty similar performing machine. Now when you move up from a Standard X, you go to a ZK. So a ZK is just extreme, about as extreme in every sense that we could make it. Has a ton of fuel capacity, has big engines. It has up to a 72-inch cutter deck down to a 52-inch cutter deck. So if you need torque and power and stability on slopes as a 52-inch deck, this thing really grips. It has 24-inch tires in the rear, 13 650 tires in the front. And like the rest of our Wright mowers with floating decks, the entire pump and engine float with the cutter deck. So we're able to keep all that stuff in line, very, very durable. So if I was to overall explain the differences between where we stand and where some of our competitors stand in the market, that would be an overview of it without getting too much into the details. And from this, I hope you can see that we've been doing this for a number of years. A lot of our products are in their second or third generation and have proven to be very, very durable. A lot of folks out there making a living with them, and that's exciting to us. And we are constantly improving and redesigning, and as more stand-ons come to the market, it's one of those things where as the water rises, all ships float higher. And so I'm actually looking forward to seeing what some of our competitors bring out, and some of those things that may be a little bit better here or there than what we're doing, and it will cause all of us to make a better mower, a mower that's more useful as a cutting machine for a landscaper. So anyways, if I was to just survey the whole scene, that would be a summary of it. I hope you found this to be helpful. And again, I want to thank you for using our equipment.